Um, Many of you know a good friend of mine, Dr. Gene Wilder, who was here with us in worship the first Sunday of October. Gene and I both share a love for storytelling. At this point in his life, he has a love for writing his stories, and last year he published a book of Christmas stories called Of Magic and Mangers. And Christmas Eve was Dr. Wilder's last service as pastor of First Baptist Church in Jefferson City, Tennessee. He has now retired. And I have told a few of his stories this Christmas season on Wednesday nights. And this morning I'm going to tell one from his book, Of Magic and Mangers, one that I believe is certainly important for us to hear as we continue to celebrate Christmas, but as that season moves on, and also in honor of his ministry and the partnership that we've cherished together. Libby and Alex moved into the Whispering Pines community neighborhood on the 6th of November. For several months, they had looked for the perfect neighborhood, for the pretty neighborhood, for the neighborhood where their children could have a lot of friends and could play without fear of harm. And when they saw Whispering Pines and its wide streets and well-manicured lawns and well-kept houses and people waving as they drove around, they knew this was the neighborhood. So, as the moving truck departed that day, Libby and Alex sat exhausted on their couch that was not yet in the right place. Exhausted from trying to find the right place for the pieces of furniture so they wouldn't have to move them again. Exhausted from trying to remember what was in which box. Just exhausted. But yet a good exhaustion because they were tired from a good day's work and something had been accomplished. Their two children, Angie and Brad, seemingly had inexhaustible energy and were riding their bikes up and down the street, and before they had one box unpacked, had made friends with several of the neighbors' children. Eventually, they began to talk about dinner and decided quickly to order pizza. But before they could dial the number, their doorbell rang. Libby answered the door, and there stood one of their neighbors. "Hello," she said. "My name is Janice Justice, and we live 4 houses up on the corner of Spruce and Elm." And she was standing there with what seemed to be a casserole. "I thought you might enjoy one of my famous chicken casseroles." "Oh, that is so sweet," she said. "We were about to order pizza. This will be a whole lot better. Why don't you join us?" No, she said. "I know you're still tired and trying to get things settled. Maybe in a week or two, Rick, my husband, and I will have you over for dinner." Well, they enjoyed the meal, and after supper, they all, children included, realized they wanted to go to bed early. So the children were tucked in. Libby seemed to go to sleep before her head hit the pillow, and as Alex was beginning to doze off, he noticed out the window that there was some faint lights glowing, and at first he thought it a street light, but then he began to see that it was changing colors. He wanted to get up and look, but he was too tired. And before he knew it, he had drifted off to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, he asked others if they had seen these lights. Nobody had. Libby said she didn't even remember going to bed. Later that morning, he was taking the casserole dish back to the justice's house, walked up the street at the corner of Spruce and Elm, and there on the mailbox it said Justice. He walked down the driveway and to the door. He knocked on the door. A gentleman answered the door in a sport coat and tie. He saw the casserole dish and he said, "Oh, you must be Alex Turner." He said, I heard that my wife brought you one of her chicken casseroles. Yes, she did. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. He said, well, that's one of her gifts, and she loves to welcome neighbors that way. He said, well, we feel very welcomed. He said, this is a wonderful neighborhood. Everybody is friendly. He said, every now and then somebody gets worked up and bent out of shape over something, but for the most part, it is a great place to live and to raise a family. I would invite you in, but my wife and I teach the senior adult ladies Sunday school class down at Community Church, and if we're the least bit late, those ladies let us know about it. So we've got to be going. So Alex left, and as he walked back down the driveway, he noticed on each side of their driveway were these two big evergreens. And he noticed on the evergreens they had little miniature Christmas lights. He thought, oh, mystery solved. That was the light I was seeing. And he thought to himself, you know, they really put their Christmas lights up early. It's the 7th of November. And we don't do that until just after Thanksgiving at our house, but to each his own. And he went back to his house. Whispering Pines is beautiful at Christmas time. Everybody has lights, candles in the windows, wreaths on the door, bows on the mailboxes. And on Christmas Eve, the whole neighborhood puts out the luminaries, the white lunch bags with sand in the bottom and the votive candle in it, and they outline everyone's driveway and the street, and it's so pretty that people from all over town drive to Whispering Pines to see the luminaries on Christmas Eve. But then the day after Christmas, some people began to take their lights down. And by New Year's, most everybody has returned to the pre-Christmas norm, with the exception of one family. Alex noticed late in January one night when he was going to bed, he still saw the lights glowing that he had seen the first night he was there. And he thought, man, they really get into this, don't they? The first to put them up and the last to take them down. In February, they were still glowing. In March, they were still glowing. By April, the Justice's Christmas lights that were still on were becoming the gossip of the neighborhood. And some of the neighbors were not happy about it. Mr. Randolph declared, if they don't take those Christmas lights down, all of our property values are going to be decreased. And that one house that's for sale is never going to sell. They've got to take them down. And then the one that was most upset was Jared Horton, who lived next door. He had cornered Rick Justice several times and demanded that they take those lights down. And each time Rick would remain calm and say, Jared, I understand you're upset and I'm sorry. But there's a reason that I can't tell you that we still have our Christmas lights glowing. You just need to trust me. In due time, you will understand. Well, all I understand is I can't sleep and the property values are going in the tank. Well, one day somebody cut the wires. And most of the neighborhood pretty much knew it was Jared Horton's son, Jeremy. But within a couple of hours, the justices had them working again, glowing that night. Well, then the neighbors started looking for some legal reason that they couldn't keep them up. They looked at local ordinances, couldn't find anything. Then they examined the Homeowners Association covenants with a fine-tooth comb, and nothing prohibited Christmas lights being up after Christmas. Within the first week of May, Adam Renfro, who was the president of the Homeowners Association, sent a letter to all the neighborhood announcing that the following Tuesday night at 7 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall of Community Church, there would be an associational meeting to discuss the Justice's Christmas lights. And the next Tuesday night at 7, the Community Church Fellowship Hall was packed. Serious business. Adam Renfro called the meeting to order. He said, I think everybody knows why we're here. We're here tonight to discuss the issue of the Justice's Christmas lights. And I think it only fair if we hear from them first. So Rick Justice made his way to the podium. You could tell he was hurt, but you could also see resolve. He said, Pam and I consider many of you to be our best friends, our closest neighbors. We love living in this community. And we don't just consider you neighbors, we love you. You've been here for us when we've needed you. And we've tried to be there for you when you've needed us. There's some things I cannot tell you, and some things you will not understand. If it was just a matter of taking our lights down so no one would be angry, we would have done it in January like everybody else. But you see, last October, we made a promise to God that we would keep our light shining all year. And as much as we don't want to make you unhappy, we do not feel like we can renege on our promise to God. Well, before his words even fell over the room, Jared Horton was on his feet. That's ridiculous, he said. You're seriously telling us that for reasons only known to you and to God, you have to keep those Christmas lights on and keep us awake night after night after night. Jared, Rick said, I promise you'll understand eventually. Just trust us. That's what we're asking you to do. Well, at that moment, Charlotte Kent stood to her feet and she said, I'll trust them. I'll trust them if they ask me to, because when Mama died, Pam was the first one to bring food to our house. And when our son Jesse was in his car wreck, she's the one that drove me to the hospital. I'll trust them. Well, I'm sure you will, Jared Horton said. You live 3 blocks away. You don't have to see the lights every night. If you lived right next to them like I do, you may not be so quick to trust them. Well, I'll trust them, Leonard Jenkins said. And I do live close. When my wife Sarah had cancer, they were there for us. And when we had to spend the summer in Houston getting treatment, they took care of our yard all summer and never accepted a dime. Do I wish the lights weren't still glowing? Yes. Do I wish they would take them down? Perhaps. But if they ask me to trust them, I'll trust them. Well, about that time, Charlie Gray stood up. Charlie Gray was a local attorney who lived in the community and had just recently appointed as district attorney. And he stood up and cleared his voice and spoke in his most legal tone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, I don't think any of us are here to impugn the character of our neighbors, the justices. We all know them to be good people. And most of us have received kindness from them in one form or another. That's not at stake. We're here to discuss business. We're here to discuss property values. And if their lights continue to glow, then the property values will decrease, period. And I don't know what they promised God or what God is doing in their lives, But I might suggest that in this moment they practice the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But when he finished, then there just began to be loud talk over each other, and the whole room was exploding with conversation, those for and those against, and the justices just sat there, Pam crying. And there was so much commotion that nobody saw Alice Bowen coming in, being pushed by her daughter in her wheelchair. They didn't see her, but they did hear the crash as her wheelchair ran into a bunch of metal folding chairs, and they all crashed on the floor, and they turned and they saw her, and there was a big gasp in the room, and several men ran over to see if Alice had been hurt. She wasn't. Her daughter pushed her onto the front. Adam Renfro came to put a mic where she could speak. Alice and Henry Bowens were the first residents to move and build in Whispering Pines. They were the ones that started the luminary tradition on Christmas Eve. And when his health was good, Henry would get carolers together to sing as people drove through the neighborhood. Henry had died a year before, and now her health was declining. She didn't get out much unless her son or daughter was taking her to her hair appointment, to the store, or to the doctor. Alice began to speak. She said, "Many of you know that me and my late husband have lived here longer than anybody. We love Whispering Pines. We started some of the traditions. I have seen many of you grow up here, and now you own a home here. Some own your home place that you grew up in." She said, "Adam, I remember when you were my paper boy. And I'll never forget when you ran over our cat with your bike. We forgave you. And Charlie, do you remember when my late husband Henry talked you out of going to California to try to strike it rich in the logging industry? He talked you into going to college and law school, and now look at you. I just wish he was here to see how well you've done." And Jared Horton, you used to be the terror of this neighborhood, you and your garage band. You kept people up all night playing that loud music. But guess what? We loved you through it because we knew it was just a phase. She said, "The justices aren't going to tell you why their lights are burning every night all year, but I will. They don't know that I know." You see, last year in October, Pam came over with one of her chicken casseroles, and I was at my lowest point. And I told her how much I missed Henry, and I told her that at Christmas time I would feel his presence because all the lights would be burning. But once Christmas was over and the lights came down, I would know again that he was gone. And Pam put her hand on my shoulder that day and she said, "Alice, I don't know what we can do, but please know that Rick and I will make this part of our prayers." And I live right across the street. From that day forward, every night, I have seen Christmas lights glowing in my window. And I've been reminded that Henry is here. And so they tell you they made a promise to God to keep burning their lights. And they did. Those lights remind me of Henry. And as far as I'm concerned, It is the light of Christ shining through their life. When Alice finished, everybody knew the meeting was over. If you drive through Whispering Pines on Christmas Eve today, you'll see the luminaries and you'll hear carolers. But if you drive through Whispering Pines at Easter or Memorial Day or 4th of July night, you're likely to see some Christmas lights. Because somebody in Whispering Pines has been asked by the Spirit to keep the light of Christ shining through their life all year.